Travel through grief. The desire to get away. It's more than a vacation. Welcome back to Travel Through Grief. I'm your host, Ellen Beckemeyer. When people say they need to get away, most of us immediately picture travel. We picture somebody sitting on a beautiful beach somewhere, or maybe a cruise ship pulling away from a dock. We can picture the suitcases, the passports, the road trips, the hotel rooms. We picture somebody leaving one place and arriving somewhere else. I've been thinking about this phrase lately because I'm not sure that's what getting away has ever meant to me. When I look back over my life, I realize I've been getting away for as long as I can remember, long before I ever boarded an airplane, long before I had ever had a passport, the money, the freedom to travel very far from home. And while my family did go on vacations just about every single year, and even a couple times a year, when I was a child, getting away usually happened on my own in front of a TV. That probably sounds strange to anyone younger than age 50. But television was different in the 70s. You couldn't decide at 9 o'clock at night when you wanted to watch a particular show, and immediately just pull it up on a screen. If a show came on at 3 in the afternoon, you either watched it and you were planted there at 3 o'clock, or you waited until the next time it appeared. Somehow, that made the experience feel a lot bigger to us. I can still remember afternoons spent watching Leave It to Beaver, then later I might watch Lost in Space. Looking back, those worlds could have been more different. One was a neighborhood, and one was a galaxy. Yet both of them carried me somewhere beyond the streets I saw every day. At the time, I wasn't thinking about travel, or possibility, or curiosity. I was just enjoying the stories. Only now do I realize how much I love the feeling that there was more out there than what I already knew. What strikes me now is that I wasn't collecting facts, but somehow I was collecting experiences through stories. Even as a child, I wasn't interested in a place because of a map or a statistic. I was interested in the people who lived there, the adventures they had, the choices they made, and the lives they led. The stories were giving me glimpses into worlds I couldn't physically reach yet. That feeling never really left me. It shows up now when I watch old episodes of The Twilight Zone. You know, every episode begins with someone who believes they understand their life. They wake up expecting an ordinary day. Then something unexpected happens. And suddenly, they're looking at themselves, their relationships, or their world differently than they did before. What fascinates me isn't the science fiction. It isn't even the twist endings. It's the wondering. I find myself sitting there thinking about the choices, the timing, and the coincidence. Sometimes I notice an actor whose entire career I already know, and I start thinking about everything that lies ahead of them that they cannot yet see. They don't know what opportunities will appear or what challenges they'll face. They're simply living the chapter they're in. The older I get, the more I realize that's true of all of us. We spend so much time trying to predict the future. In most of the meaningful moments in our lives, they just arrive unannounced. We don't know which conversation we'll remember 20 years later. We don't know which decision will quietly alter the course of our lives. We don't know which ordinary day will become an important memory. One of the reasons I enjoy those old episodes is that for a little while, I get to feel about something other than my own life. I get pulled into someone else's story. I become curious about what happens next. I find myself laughing and wondering, worrying and hoping, and occasionally sitting quietly after the credits roll because I'm still thinking about what I just watched. That's different than trying to escape. I think there were times in my life when I wanted to get away from pain. I wanted a relief from the grief. I wanted relief from uncertainty. But what I'm describing now feels different. I don't want to stop feeling. I want to feel more than one thing. Grief is still part of my life. The people I love are still part of my story. I still think about them. I definitely still miss them. I still have moments when memories appear unexpectedly. It catches me by surprise. The difference is that grief is no longer the only thing happening. There's room for curiosity now, for wonder and anticipation. A few months ago, I found myself sitting on a patio in Costa Rica, looking toward the ocean. This view was everything, y'all. It was early in the morning, and the day still felt new. The air was just different than the Kentucky air. The sounds were different, even the pace felt different. I remember sitting there trying to absorb the fact that I was actually there, because for months I had only known Costa Rica through photographs and stories. Then something moved in the trees. At first I couldn't tell what I was looking at. I watched for a moment, then realized there's monkeys moving through the branches. As I kept looking, I noticed babies. They were so cute. Suddenly I found myself smiling because nobody had told me there would be monkeys at breakfast. Nobody had mentioned that part. It wasn't on an itinerary. It wasn't part of an excursion. It was simply happening. There's monkeys outside my patio at breakfast. The monkeys weren't performing for visitors. They weren't interested in me. They were busy being monkeys. The babies, they climbed, they explored. The adults, they moved from branch to branch, tree to tree. The entire scene felt wonderfully ordinary to them and completely extraordinary for me. I sat there watching and realizing that I had lived 57 years and never seen a monkey in the wild. Of course I knew monkeys existed. I'd seen them in books, movies, documentaries, and definitely at the zoo. I've seen that my entire life. Yet none of those experiences felt remotely like sitting outside while a family of monkeys moved through the trees, and they were actually below me. That morning wasn't valuable because I learned something new. It was valuable because I experienced something new. As I sat there watching these monkeys, I kept thinking about how many years I had spent seeing the world through other people's eyes. Television had done that for me as a child. Books, movies, even travel websites. Somebody else chooses what they think is important and presents it to us. They show us the highlight. They show us the beautiful view. They show us the moment they believe will make us want to come. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, those things are often what spark our curiosity in the first place. But sitting there that morning, I realized there is a difference between being told about something and experiencing it for yourself. Before I ever arrived in Costa Rica, I knew what the photographs looked like. I knew there were beaches, the rainforest. I knew there'd be wildlife. I knew that it was a beautiful place to stay. Yet none of those things prepared me for what it felt like to wake up in a particular place on a particular morning and discover the monkeys were moving through the trees while I sat outside trying to decide whether I was fully awake yet. That experience belonged to me and the people that I was on the trip with. It wasn't borrowed from a travel article. It wasn't borrowed from someone else's social media feed. It was ours. It was mine. The longer I watched those monkeys, the more I found myself smiling at how little they cared that I was there. They were not putting on a show. They weren't doing anything special because visitors had arrived. They were simply living their lives. The babies followed the adults. The adults moved through the branches with an ease that made it look effortless. Every movement suggested that they had done this 1,000 times before. For them, it was just an ordinary morning. For me, it was something I would remember for years. As the days passed, I found myself paying attention to things that I might have overlooked when I was younger. I still appreciated the scenery, the ocean views, the beautiful places we visited, but I also found myself looking out the window during the drives and wondering about the people who lived there. I wondered, what's a normal day look like for them? I wonder, what were they worried about? What do they celebrate? And what did they look forward to? I wonder which traditions had been handed down through their families and which ones had changed over time. When I was younger, I think I traveled mostly to see things. I wanted to visit the landmarks. I wanted to experience places I had heard about. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, many of those experiences become wonderful memories. But somewhere along the way, my curiosity shifted. I became less interested in checking a place off a list and just more interested in understanding it. I became interested in what happened there when visitors weren't around. I was more interested in the stories that never appear in a brochure. Costa Rica reminded me of that over and over. There were places like that. It looked exactly like that in photographs I had seen before I left home. There were also places that looked nothing like those photographs. Some of those roads were so freaking rough, it was like pothole after pothole. Some buildings were weathered. Some moments were uncomfortable. Yet those things never diminished the experience. If anything, they made it feel more real. They reminded me I wasn't visiting a postcard. I was visiting a place where people actually live. I think that's one reason the kindness stayed with me as much as the scenery did. Beautiful scenery is wonderful, but kindness, that reaches us differently. Kindness creates a feeling. It lingers. Long after I stop remembering the details of a particular day, I often remember how someone made me feel. I remember people who were patient. I remember those who were welcoming. I remember those who seemed genuinely happy just to share a small piece of their world with someone from somewhere else. As I reflected on all that, I realized how differently I think about travel now than I once did. There was a time when I might have described a trip as getting away. Those words probably would have felt accurate. Life felt heavy, and the idea of leaving for a while felt appealing. What I understand now is that I never actually leave my life behind. My memories travel with me. My experiences travel with me. And most of all, the people I love, they travel with me and in me. Even the grief travels with me. What changes is that grief is no longer the only thing in the room. There's suddenly a wider world asking for my attention. There's new sights and sounds, people and experiences. There are stories unfolding all around me. There are moments that invite the curiosity instead of rumination. There are discoveries waiting in places where I really wasn't expecting to find them. The grief hasn't disappeared. It simply has company. Maybe that's why I no longer think of travel as running away. Running away suggests that I'm trying to escape something. What I'm looking for now, it feels completely different. I'm not trying to leave my life. I'm trying to participate in it, experience it more fully. I'm trying to remain curious about a world that continues to surprise me, even after all these years. When I came home, I kept thinking about those monkeys. Oh, they were so cute. Not because they were rare, not because they were even extraordinary. I kept thinking about them because they had been living their lives, whether I was there or not. Every morning, they were waking up and moving through those trees. Every morning, there were sounds and stories and experiences unfolding all around them. The only thing that had changed was that for one brief morning, I happened to be present. I remember realizing that the same thing is true everywhere. There's families gathering around dinner tables. I think about that every Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter. There's children growing up. I think about that every time we have the first day of school and graduation. Traditions are being carried forward. People are celebrating milestones. They're grieving their losses. But they're also making plans, changing directions, and telling their own stories. Most of it happens whether we witness it or not. Travel doesn't create those moments. It simply allows us to step into a small piece of them. When I was a little girl sitting in front of that television, I had no idea where life would take me. I didn't know I would one day sit on a patio in Costa Rica watching monkeys in the trees. I didn't know I would travel to places I had only read about. I didn't know which dreams would come true, which dreams would actually change, and which dreams would lead to entirely different dreams. All I knew was that I loved the feeling that there was more out there than what I already knew. Looking back, I think that feeling has been guiding me all along. I really do. It guided me through stories. It guided me through those books and television shows. It guided me through travel. It continues to guide me today. Every time I become curious about something, every time I wonder what might happen if I said yes to an opportunity, every time I decide to experience something for myself instead of relying on someone else's description, that same feeling shows up again. Perhaps that's what dreaming really is. It begins with curiosity. It begins with wondering what exists beyond the horizon you can currently see. With the willingness to believe that there may still be experiences waiting for you that you cannot yet imagine. You don't need a complete plan. You don't need even certainty. And you don't need guarantees. You simply need enough curiosity to take the next step and see what might be waiting there. And every once in a while, if you're fortunate, the next step leads you to a place where you find yourself sitting outside on an ordinary morning, watching a family of monkeys move through the trees, and realizing that the world has been carrying on its beautiful, complicated, fascinating life all along. You just happen to show up in time to witness a small piece of it. Always remember, keep moving and carrying your life forward. If this episode connected with you, I'd love for you to follow our podcast, leave a review, or share it with someone who may need it. Those small actions truly help new podcasts like Travel Through Grief grow and reach more people. And thank you to everyone who has already listened, rated, reviewed, and supported this journey. I appreciate you more than you know. Until next time, keep finding your way forward.